Hello, everyone, and welcome to another special guest episode of the Top Order podcast. Well, as you well know by now, Stuart and I have been talking a lot about spin bowling lately, so we thought, well, why not get some insights from one of the best in the business? Tonight's guest has played over 100 games for the Black Caps across all three formats and is fresh off a T20 World Cup run that took New Zealand all the way to the final. Ish Sodhi, welcome to the Top Order podcast.
Cheers for having me, boys.
Well, look, it's our pleasure to have you on the show, and thanks for joining us. We're recording this on the 30th of November, and you're out of MIQ tomorrow morning. You must be looking forward to getting home. You guys have been away for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been close to 3 months now, and thankfully the rules had changed kind of midway through, so it's only a 7-day hotel quarantine as opposed to the 14. So now I think the boys are pretty rapt to get out and get amongst some sort of freedom and just a bit of normality.
And were you watching the test last night? That obviously this might come out in a few days' time, but the first tests, New Zealand and India, I was bloody nervous at the time watching, but how good was it to see Ajaz at the end there battle away? Obviously, Ratchin did a great job as well, but I'm pretty biased towards number 11s.
Yeah. No, my nails are chewed up, mate. I was watching it. It was a great time actually in MIQ. The games would start at 5 p.m. and you really got no other obligation, so you just sit there and watch the entire test unfold. And it's just a great display of why Test cricket's so exciting. And I guess the draw in the end almost felt like a bit of a win for us, because in those conditions against that opposition, man, it's a pretty special thing to achieve. And young guy on debut being carried by the old statesman Ajaz Patel, I mean, you can't really ask for too much more, can you?
No, absolutely not. And I mean, you've actually, I remember actually you and Neil Wagner doing the same thing against England. I mean, you sort of touched on it just before, but do those kind of wins do those kind of results feel as satisfying as a win? Because, yeah, you're sort of not expected to be getting that draw in that situation.
Yeah, I suppose it just shows a great defiance. And, I guess that word can be thrown around quite a lot in the coming days, but you're up against all odds, I think, especially in the conditions they've been in, man. Like spin, a lot of teams go over there and get crumbled by their spinners. Ravi Ashwin, Ravi Jadeja, now Akshar Patel's bowling really well at the moment. And to defend the ball for that long in those conditions is something that's really difficult to do for top order batsmen, let alone guys down the lower order. It's not taking anything away from Ratchin. He's a very, very accomplished first class player already, but I think even Will Somerville's contribution at the top of the order, mate, this is what dreams are made of. Day 5 test matches, and, you want to win test matches, but I guess draws in this regard are almost as good as a win.
Yeah, I was definitely rooting for Will Somerville as a fellow offie to keep going. I thought he might bat all day there. He was looking great. But look, before we'll get stuck into the World Cup chat, but before we do that, how's your head, by the way? That David Wiese can hit a ball. It was scary watching it at home here.
Yeah, thankfully, my hands got in the way. Got a fair bit of stick from the boys for not catching it. I kind of nicknamed myself Glue Hands for a while there because I hadn't dropped the catch for a while, so kind of lost that nickname, which was a bit of a shame. But it was more so like kind of later in the competition, we ventured over to India and a ball came past my head even quicker, and I had no chance to even see it. So I was in a few wars when it came to caught and bowls, but yeah, it's just lucky that it didn't sort of get me any lower in the head.
Is that something you guys train for as a bowling unit? Do you practice now? Obviously, with a lot of T20 cricket, there's a lot more balls coming back at you at pace. Is that something that you guys train for?
Definitely not enough. I think it's probably highlighted the last wee while, but it's definitely something we can neglect at times. Just you tend to forget, I think, as a bowler, that as soon as you let the ball go, your main job is now fielding. So you almost have to prepare for it. But it's definitely something kind of upon reflection of this World Cup is something I'd like to train a bit more of.
Mm. Yeah, and obviously in that T20 World Cup campaign, let's touch on it a little now. New Zealand all the way to the big dance yet again, and that's something that's become a trend with this Black Cap side over the past 5 or 6 years. What is it about your team, Ish, that makes it possible to consistently get yourselves to the pointy end of these big tournaments against, well, let's face it, some maybe more fancied rivals on paper and in terms of, playing budgets?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I suppose the consistent success that the team's been having over the past few years, and T20 cricket, we've been a successful team, but across all formats to, I guess, compete in major ICC events, whether it's one-day formats, making 2 finals, and obviously the World Test Championship, which was phenomenal earlier this year. And I guess to get to the final of the T20 World Cup, probably against all odds. I don't think many people favoured us to get that far. It's probably something that was highlighted quite a bit once we got there. I genuinely think it's down to a strong core of senior members of the side that are kind of leading the way for the younger guys to come in and just be able to express their skills really well. The top guys like Kane, Roscoe, Tim and Trent, Wags, these guys have been there for a long period of time and they've kind of set a great example for everyone else coming in. And I think that's kind of showing up in a lot of success that we're having.
And obviously the final didn't go sort of how we hoped it would, or the man upstairs there, Baldy, we won't touch too much on it because, he was relatively happy with the result. But what about that knock from Kane? You touched on him before. I mean, that was just unreal. And I mean, after watching that, like, did you guys kind of feel like you had enough at the break?
Yeah, look, the way he played was crazy. Taking Mitch Starc the way that he did. Mitch Starc's one of the best bowlers that's probably walked the earth with the white ball in his hand. So the way that he played him was world class. And definitely, I think runs on the board are always great to have in big games like that. You probably wanted a few more runs. I mean, you always want a few more, but I guess in the end, it just wasn't enough with the way that the Aussies built a really strong partnership through that power play and then through the middle period. It was really tough to contain, but it's a shame that a knock like Kane's kind of goes to a losing cause because, like you say, it's just one of the best knocks I've seen in T20 cricket. So, yeah.
And look, I actually tend to agree. I said it on our podcast a week or so ago that I feel like Australia would have chased down anything that night. It was sort of one of those days where Warner and Marsh were just locked in. But, I guess moving sort of out wider on the tournament, a lot was made of the toss in that tournament and kind of the dew. Can you kind of explain from a playing point of view why there was so much chat about that? Like, I think I've heard people talk about it quickened up the pitch or something like that. Is that right?
I think there's kind of been a stigma around the UAE for the last wee while. Like, I remember reading a stat maybe going into the final or just before saying that 16 of the last 18 games had been won chasing in Dubai. So I guess there's a bit of a psychological factor there as well. Winning the toss, I guess, gives you that bit of confidence going in to say, like history suggests that this is the way to win games, majority of games at this ground. Certainly later in the tournament, when we first got to the UAE, it was real hot. It was like 40, 45 degrees. But I suppose towards the back end of the tournament, when we actually started playing a lot of games, the weather started to cool down quite a lot. And I think that change in temperature certainly brought a lot more dew than perhaps at the start of the tournament. And so it was definitely something to factor in later in the tournament. And that was kind of when we played the majority of our night games. So it was just a challenge that we had to overcome.
And in terms of the final, was dew a factor in the second innings? It certainly seemed like in a lot of games, teams talked about the dew being a factor, but I don't remember there being much chat about the dew at the outcome or at the conclusion of the final. Was it an influencing factor when you guys were having to bowl in that second innings?
I don't think it was that much of a factor. I think the wicket generally might have benefited a little bit from it. It might have got a little bit better to bat on. But I think it's just a game of momentum. The guys just came out in that power play and kind of from ball one, like the way Mitch Marsh was hitting the ball, it was really hard to contain whether there was dew, whether it was a slow wicket or, what conditions you were faced with. The guy just had a great night. And so I think upon reflection, it was always going to be, I guess, history suggested that it was going to be tougher to bat first. But I don't think the dew played a hell of a big role.
Yeah. And let's go right back to the start of the tournament. That first game against Pakistan, certainly if we're looking at social media as any indication, a huge game, and their fans were very much looking forward to it. And we could sort of see it on TV. That crowd was electric. What was it like for you guys in the game? Was that something that you really took notice of in the early stages of that Pakistan game?
Definitely, because I guess the last wee while that we've kind of had COVID as a obstacle that we've had to face around cricket. We've had a lot of games where we haven't had any crowd. So to come out to Sharjah, I think initially they said that there was going to be 70% capacity crowd, but you couldn't see any empty seats in there. It was just heaving, a sea of green, the passion that the Pakistani fans brought, and obviously there was a fair bit of unrest. Obviously, we had left Pakistan through some security concerns, so they were really looking forward to seeing New Zealand play against Pakistan, and this was a great chance for the tournament to start off with a hiss and a roar. So it was phenomenal. The energy of the crowd was great, and the cricket on show was awesome too.
And what was the relationship like on the field between, the Black Caps and the Pakistani players? The two nations traditionally have got along very well in terms of their on-the-field cricket relationship. What was it like having had to pull out of the tour and then meeting them again in the first game of the Cup? Was it a little bit tense out there, or was everyone kind of in good spirits?
Yeah, we've been asked that question quite a lot, and it's funny because it didn't really feel like there was anything going on between us and the other playing group, and I think it was just something that was sparked up on social media, and what it's like these days. People get an idea and they kind of roll with it. But the Pakistani team have always been a great team to socialise with. They're very, very respectful, polite. They play cricket in a really, really great spirit. Very passionate about the game, and they're incredibly talented and very competitive. So that was always something that was going to shine through. And I guess the other stuff was just a lot of white noise, but white noise on a massive scale.
Mm.
Yeah, and you good point about the Pakistan team, because I think I saw some footage of them. Maybe I can't remember who it was going into the dressing room of, maybe Namibia or Scotland or one of the lesser ranked nations, and it looked some really cool stuff that they did off the field, and I think even when they were here, did some really cool stuff. So good on you for pointing that out. But let's move to that game against India. You played a starring role, which will give you a shout out. It's not the first time you've done that in a T20 World Cup. You've got a really good record against them. You dismissed Kohli and Rohit, which obviously surely makes it a nice one to look back on. But I kind of want to ask specifically about matchups, because it seems like T20 cricket is just all about matchups now. It's certainly what we hear about in the commentary, and you can kind of see it when different bowlers come on. Do you kind of know it as a player, like before the start of the game, that you might have a favoured matchup with Kohli, for example, and as soon as he comes in, you're going to come on to bowl, or is it actually a bit more fluid than that when you're on the field?
I guess if you can kind of sum up that question, I think the first thing that comes to mind is data. Like the amount of data that you have at your disposal nowadays, even compared to when I started my career, is just crazy. It comes down to dot ball percentages, how many times certain batters get out to certain types of bowlers. On what conditions do they score the most? Balls that hit the stumps, do they score? Balls that don't hit the stumps. So there's just so much information that you're flooded with all the time. And I think the matchups thing that you speak about has started so much more in this day and age, but which I think there's definitely a huge amount of benefit in it. But I reckon it can sometimes take away the instinctive side of T20 cricket, and that's what I reckon the best players have, is that kind of ability to really back their instincts. Whether it's I'm really feeling good today, this bowler's bowling, I'm going to take him on, brilliant, try to do it, and might come off, might not, but I guess if you're always caught up in that matchup thing, you're kind of like, well, if I need to work on this, but then kind of don't really allow yourself to think about the other threats or other kind of obstacles that you face out there. But yeah, it's definitely something that's spoken about a lot more nowadays.
And in terms of your role, Ish, I mean, leg spinning's hard enough as it is without having to think about, okay, I need to bowl this particular type of ball or this variation or this subtle adjustment to my pace or my flight or whatever. Like, just landing a leggy is hard enough as it is without having to have all of those kind of variations. How do you have to adjust your preparation, your training, the way that you practice in order to be able to have not just a stock ball, but 8 or 9 different variations that you can call on and have to execute under pressure in those kind of key T20 moments? Because it can come down to one ball in some games.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I guess the best way for me to kind of answer that question is just kind of like think about a scenario that we're faced with. Say if in the semi-final we're about to face Moeen Ali, and Moeen Ali is notoriously known for taking spin bowlers down. And he's got a great swing path, allows him to free his arms. So I guess leading into a big game against a guy like Moeen Ali, you want to think, right, what's going to be my option to, not allow him to free his arms as much? And it might be that you bowl the ball down leg side, wrongins that pitch just outside leg stump to try to hit his pad. And so that's something that you train kind of 2 or 3 days out. It might be something that you've not tried before, but something that that the data suggests actually really works. And, over a long period of time, the data kind of adds up. So you kind of take that into your training and bowl to a left-hander in the nets, and then try to try to go out there and try to execute it in the game.
Stuart and I have talked a lot lately about T20 cricket and how it's changed the game for spin bowlers, wrist spinners in particular, because at the start of T20, wrist spinning was almost an afterthought. We thought everyone was going to get smashed. Everyone went in with fast bowling units, but it's been the opposite. Spin bowling, particularly wrist spin, has thrived, and bowlers have got so many more variations now and so many more tricks in their bag. And then you compare that to Test cricket, and we almost see that most parts of the world spin's almost an afterthought. How has sort of the evolution of T20 cricket impacted your approach to the game and how you go about your bowling?
I think probably the last 10 or so years, it's kind of been, a period where leg spinners have kind of shown their wares in T20 cricket a lot. Most teams that you see around the world have at least one wrist spinner in their side, and I think the best ones thrive when they're complemented with a strong pace bowling attack or a finger spinner that's a very tight and frugal spin bowler, something like Mitchell Satner. But I think leg spinners have generally done really well in T20 cricket with the ability to spin the ball both ways. It just gives the captain and the bowler an option to spin the ball away from either the right or left-hand batsman, which generally is a good defensive and attacking option. And I think that's one reason why they've thrived. But I guess looking at Test cricket, other than Yasir Shah, there hasn't been too many leg spinners, since Warney that have done exceptionally well in Test cricket. And I think that just comes down to the wickets that have been produced. Finger spinners and the accuracy has been a huge factor in helping them be successful in Test cricket. And I think that's probably one thing that works really well in leg spinner's favour is the odd ball that, comes out slightly shorter and wider, gets cut for one, and as opposed to in Test cricket, gets cut for four. And so you can still build on that pressure. So I think that's definitely a huge factor into why they've been successful in T20 cricket.
And I mean, you had a crack at Test cricket really early on in your career. It definitely, I don't know, from the outside, I guess it seemed like you're a real case of, they sort of talk about learning on the job. For you at that level because you hadn't played much first-class cricket. How do you kind of look back at that experience now? Was it like a tough experience going in, or was it like, do you think about it as an awesome opportunity that you kind of got to see where you're at a young age? Yeah, where do you view it?
Oh, there's certainly mixed emotions. It was a time where I hadn't played really any cricket at all. Pretty much came straight out of club cricket. I remember losing my spot to a certain Stuart Lipshaw on the Auckland A side. And so, it was pretty green around the edges, Like, pretty much coming out of school cricket and then club cricket and playing, I think, 5 or 6 games of first class cricket into tests. It was probably something I wasn't really ready for at the time. Looking back, while I look back at the opportunity being a great one and being exposed to some great players with spin and exposed to different parts of the world at such a young age, coming from a really small town like Papatoetoe. It's pretty exciting times. I guess looking back at it, it's probably helped in my role of developing into a, white ball player later on in my career. That sort of resilience you learn at such a young age, I reckon, holds you in good stead. But I can't help but think it would be great to have another crack. And also what it would have been like if I debuted in Test cricket, if I was 25 or 26 with a bit of experience under my belt. Where it's hard not to think about those things. I think you've got to look back at it with as much of a positive attitude as you can. Because if it hadn't been the case, then I probably wouldn't have found white ball cricket like I have.
Oh, thanks for the shout out there, Ish. I actually was no joke. I was saying to Baldy before we started that when I played Auckland A's, I couldn't. I think you came down actually in the first game that I played, and I said to a few other guys, I cannot believe that they're picking me. This old man, and instead of this young guy, he's going definitely eclipse what I can do, and you've certainly proved that right. So
you're a lot younger. You're younger than you make out, though. You're not that old, are you?
I'm about, what am I? About 37 now, mate. So
no,
but yeah, still young at heart.
Oh my god, that makes ancient too, mate.
But
did you play for Cornwall or East Coast Bays?
East Coast Bays. We're all Bays boys on this podcast, so we try and give Schmulzy and Cam Fletcher a bit of a shout out whenever we can. And you touched on it a bit there with kind of where you're at with Test cricket. I mean, I think your last test maybe was that awesome series in Pakistan in 2018. It seems like it is a goal of yours to get back to Test cricket. How do you kind of go about doing that if that's the case? Because I guess with white ball cricket, it takes up so much of your year if you're going to be going, IPL stuff and going around the world playing different formats. And then also, like you touched on it when we were talking to Baldy before, it's a different type of training, I'm sure, about what you're trying to achieve. So, yeah, sort of where are you at with Test cricket now?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think personally, there's still a huge burning desire to get back playing Test cricket. I still come from that sort of purist mindset, growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, watching Warney, Kumble, and McGill. Can't help but seeing those guys as your heroes and wanting to emulate what they did. Although that's a lot more difficult than they made look on the TV back then, which is kind of niggly. But cheers, guys. I guess the training is different, but a big part of it is just the chance to play more first class cricket more consistently. And I guess there's a party that almost has to weigh up whether playing a lot of white ball cricket is to the detriment of your red ball stuff, or whether you can find that balance in your training as well. And I think it is probably about changing your training up a little bit more, not thinking too tactically about T20 cricket, but just building those fundamentals up again of how you can get them drawing forward and playing defensive strokes on the front foot for longer. And I'm certainly a firm believer that if you've got those fundamentals behind you, it makes T20 cricket even easier. But it's just finding that sort of block of first class games. And I've been fortunate over the past 5 or 6 years to play a lot of first class cricket, and it'll just be nice to get another couple of years of that, and hopefully continue some solid first class form, and hopefully that means that there's a call up around the corner. But it's definitely something I'll strive for over the next wee while. And being 29 years old, although I feel like I've been around forever, still feel relatively youthful at this stage.
Yes, well, wrist spinners don't come into their own until they're mid to late 30s anyway. So you've got plenty of time, Ish, and we'll be rooting for you to get back. Just wanted to touch on some of the work that you're doing in the IPL. Over the last couple of years, you've been part of the backroom staff for, I think it's Rajasthan, I think if that's right, as a team liaison and spin consultant. I guess firstly, were you able to actually get involved with Rajasthan over the last couple of IPL seasons with COVID playing a part? And what sort of role does a team liaison play and a spin consultant play in those IPL sides?
Yeah, so I guess initially the conversation was had around the spin bowling consultant stuff, and that was mainly the role that I was going to take up. And I guess the alluring factor about it was, I guess firstly the reason I probably got the role was when I played there for a couple of years, worked pretty closely with some of the young spinners there, and developed some pretty good and strong relationships with them, and we were able to achieve some pretty cool things. So it was nice that although I wasn't required in a playing capacity in that third year, I was asked back to come and do this role. And I guess another reason why I kind of explored that opportunity was with COVID being around, with the quarantine periods that were around. If you were required to be a replacement player, it was a lot less simple than just being able to get on a flight and go and start playing. And so the opportunity was there if there was injuries around, to get back playing, because that was obviously, it is still obviously the priority is to play as much cricket as possible. But that was kind of, I guess, the blueprint around it all.
And I guess playing's definitely on the radar for you. You're throwing your name in the mix for the big expansion auction coming up in the next IPL?
Yeah, I have a little dabble, see how we go. It's such a great tournament to be a part of, Baldy. It's just like it's like a disco ball event. Like there's always something going on. Everyone's having a great time. There's music everywhere, and the quality of cricket's so high. I mean, you play some games, you just feel like you're playing international cricket the whole time. Rock stars come out to bat. Pollards and your AB de Villiers, and you tested at your nerve at the highest level. I mean, there's nothing quite like it.
And how do those auctions work? Like, do you get any clues beforehand that there's interest in you, or is it like I'm thinking of someone like Kyle Jameson, right? He's had a life-changing moment in that auction. Does he know beforehand that something's going to happen? I think I heard that he kind of went to bed and then woke up just around the time. Maybe he's playing that down for the media, but like, do you actually know, okay, a couple of teams are going to bid on me or not?
Well, you definitely don't know, if there are a couple of specific teams that are going to bid on you. But I guess the thing is, like, if you're running hot and your form's been really good and you've got a skill set like Kyle, big fast bowler and generally like big hard hitting batsman, probably the two types of overseas players that people look for a lot. I think you probably have a good chance. So where you don't kind of have any specific hints or anything like that, I think you definitely would expect guys like that with that sort of skill to get some bites. But no, it's just random, isn't it? Like it's pretty much like being an object on an eBay auction, and you get picked up for whatever any team kind of places a dollar value on your skill set. It's pretty unique place to be, but definitely a very exciting tournament to be a part of.
Thank you so much for spending a bunch of time with us, Ish, this evening on the Top Order podcast. Before we let you go, one World Cup just gone, another one not far away in Australia 2022. So what's the next year look like for you building up to that tournament? Does anything look different for you preparing for Australian conditions, slightly different wickets, slightly different boundary dimensions, slightly different ground sets? What's it look like for you in terms of building up for that tournament?
Yeah, I think simply in the UAE and probably Asian conditions, side spin plays a big role as a spin bowler. You want to be able to skid the ball sometimes, in places like Sharjah. And if you do want to turn it, you want to turn it at pace where, Australia's got bouncy wickets, and obviously being quite a tall bowler, I want to extract as much bounce as I can. So overspin is probably going to be the main focus over the next year or so. And we're going into a Super Smash campaign now, which will be pretty exciting. And the wickets are generally pretty true and the boundaries are pretty small. So it's a great place to learn T20 cricket and T20 skills. So along with that and some international tours coming up over the next 6 to 8 months, I think we'll have plenty of time to prepare for that World Cup.
Yeah, well, certainly all the best for that Super Smash coming up. We're looking forward to having cricket return to Auckland and to all parts of New Zealand. And we're very much looking forward to having our Black Caps and domestic heroes running around in the Super Smash. I'm very much looking forward to getting down to the outer oval at Eden Park and enjoying that. Ish Sodhi, thank you so much again for joining us here on the Top Order podcast. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, talking wrist spin, spinner to spinner, albeit ones of very, very different skill levels. But thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Cheers, boys.